What is a house? A shelter? A building to hold our possessions? Is it a place to hold our memories? What happens to an empty house? Do the memories stay in the walls and rooms like ghosts? Houses contain memories and history. They anchor us to our community. They remind us who we are and where we come from, where our town came from. A house we drive by every day. We grew up with it in our town, saw it on the walk to school, drove by it on our way to work. Suddenly it seems it's gone, and we feel it. We feel the hole left in the fabric of our city. Its walls can no longer whisper to us, "Remember?" The next time you drive by that old house that is falling down, ask, what can we do with it? How can it serve our community? Can new memories be made within its walls? Christian Gore was a Danville blacksmith and sometimes served as a town trustee. This house was built for Gore in 1859 by Robert Russell Jr. and was originally part of a 61-acre farm, of which Gore sold the front portion to James Barbie in 1850. The Gores did not live in this home for very long, however, for they fell upon hard times during the Civil War, and the court commission sold out the heirs to a Mr. J.K. McGoodwin. Eventually, the house became part of a succession of educational institutions that occupied the area around it, including the Caldwell Female Institute, the Danville Classical and Military Institute, and finally the Kentucky College for Women. In subsequent years, the Christian Gore House was home to offices of the Danville Board of Education and is currently being used for storage by Danville schools. The Christian Gore House is one of the remaining examples of Robert Russell Jr.'s important mark on the architectural history of Boyle County. This was the home of John William Bate, one of the first educators of free blacks in this area. The son of a slave and slaveholder, John William Bate was born into slavery outside Louisville, Kentucky in 1855. He and his mother and siblings were freed in 1862. They then moved to Louisville, where they lived a very hard life, moving from place to place. A missionary, Miss Kate Gilbert, saw him and asked him if he would like to attend school, which he did, and so she enrolled him in the mission school. Later, in 1872, John Bate enrolled in Berea College and took on work in a tobacco factory to pay for his tuition, room, and board. He received a bachelor's degree in 1881 and later his master's degree in 1892. Soon, he moved to Danville and became one of the first African American educators in this area when he began teaching in a one-room schoolhouse on Stanford Road. By the time Mr. Bate retired in 1942, he had devoted 58 years of his life to education, growing a one-room schoolhouse to a 20-room accredited high school with 15 teachers and 600 students. In 1964, following integration, the school became Bate Middle School. As the Civil War swept through Kentucky in October of 1862, the town of Perryville and its citizens found themselves directly in its path. The largest and most significant battle Kentucky would see during the war would take place here, changing the lives of Perryville's citizens and its history. After the fighting was over, many homes in Perryville were commandeered by the occupying armies and used for headquarters, barracks, and hospitals. The Carrick Park's house was one of the homes whose family was displaced and subsequently occupied during and after the fighting was over. Main Street Perryville director Vicki Good shares the story of this home, its people, and the adjacent cave that served an integral role in the original settlement of Perryville.
In the early 1770s, James Harbison led a group of 4 other men who were Mr. Tucker, Mr. Potts, Mr. Ewing, and Mr. Walker to settle what is now Perryville, and it was called Harbison Station. They arrived here and they spent their first winter in the cave, and that kept them out of the weather and away from the Indians that were prevalent in this area at the time. And then the next spring they brought their families here to settle. And this cave went through under what is now US 68 and came out under what is the Tucker home. It was a tailor shop in the early days, and the cave entrance is still seen under that house, and that's where the citizens of Perryville got their water for many years until water wells were dug. James Harbison was killed on what is now the Elmwood Inn property while they were tending a corn crop that they were growing there, and he and Mr. Ewing were both killed when the other settlers went out to find Mr. Harbison and Mr. Ewing. All they found was James Harbison's head. In the early 1850s, James Vance Carrick Parks bought the home from Squire Roberts and moved his family here in 1856. The house was originally built in the early 1800s. It was one story, and in 1950 it underwent massive renovation, and they added the second floor and the summer kitchen and all of that, and that's when the Carricks bought it. On the evening before the Civil War, Confederate soldiers marched down the Lebanon Road, and they stopped at the house and rested on the sidewalks. And on October the 8th, 1862, the day of the battle, the family was told that they would have to leave the home because the fighting had started and shots were being fired over Perryville. So they loaded their wagons and the children and went out the Lebanon Road 3.5 miles and spent the night. They came back the next day on the 9th of October to find what belongings they had left in the home spread all over the yard, and Union soldiers in charge of the house. And this became their headquarters for the medical corps that moved in after the battle. So in 1972, Laura Parks passed away, and at that time the house was left to the heirs, and it was in its original condition just as they walked away, because when she passed away, it was just like it had been, and she had been raised in this house. All the original furnishings, everything was still here. Her doll collection, she was a huge doll collector. And all of that was here. And then later on, Dooley Wallace bought the home and all the other homes on Merchants Row and the storefronts, and started the Boyle Landmark Trust with the acquisition of that. That's where all of that began, was with Dooley Wallace and the purchase of these buildings. You'll notice on the doors and windows on the downstairs, they're all grained, so all the woodwork and everything will be preserved. So it's mainly just drywall and cleaning and adding the utilities, and then the house will be ready for use. Hopefully we can use this as an event center. You can rent it for weddings, reunions, parties. And that is our intent. That's what we'd like to see it used for, as a community gathering place and event center.
Just down the street from the Carrick Park's house sits another 19th century home, currently under renovations. Combining Greek Revival and Italianate elements, the Johnson Britton house was home to Samuel and Mary Britton in the 1860s during the Battle of Perryville. The home was damaged by a cannonball which crashed through the north bedroom roof during the fighting and lodged in the south bedroom door. Samuel was a tanner by trade. He married his first wife, Mary Bottom, in 1830, and they would remain together until her death shortly after the battle in 1862. Samuel then married again to another Mary, Mary Adams. They would live out the rest of their lives in this home, with Samuel's death being in 1891 and Mary Adams a year later. Samuel McDowell House, also known as Pleasantville, was built in 1784 for Ephraim McDowell's father, Samuel. It was the home of the McDowell family from 1784 to 1845. The home is of the Greek Revival style with portico and pediment, and the porch, which is now collapsed, was added later. Samuel McDowell was a Revolutionary War soldier, one of the first district court judges in Kentucky, and an early political leader, presiding over 9 of the 10 constitutional conventions that were held to separate from Virginia and form the state of Kentucky. Samuel and his wife Mary lived here at Pleasantville from 1785 to 1787, when they moved to Jessamine County to be near their youngest son Caleb. In 1789, the estate was conveyed to their son Joseph McDowell. After Caleb's death in 1810, the elder McDowells moved back to Pleasantville, where they would live until their deaths. Samuel McDowell died in 1817, and his wife Mary McClung in 1827. One Danville home that has recently been given new life is the Willis Grimes house. Shane Baker, Pat Heist, and Jared Smith explain the history of this beautiful home and the role the Willis Grimes house will play in the operation of the newly built Wilderness Trail Distillery.
Willis Grimes was a Kentuckian through and through, so he was that first generation of Kentuckian born here after his parents settled in the area. He was actually in the militia in the War of 1812, was taken as a prisoner of war, run up through Canada by the British, held captive for 2 years before he could return to Kentucky and kind of make his fortune. He bought this property in the late 1850s, built this house in 1859. It's on the National Register of Historic Places as a prime example of the early Italianate Federal style architecture. So Willis put a lot of thought into this house, and we're glad to be here and kind of continue that tradition on.
Our approach to placing a distillery here in Kentucky was we were looking for following the tradition of making bourbon in Kentucky, and with our homes being here in Boyle County and Danville, we wanted to try to pay homage to not only where we reside, but also get Danville on the map with bourbon production, which really, if you look back from a historical standpoint, this is where it all started. This was the Wilderness Trail as you came through, and Danville was one of the first settlements outside of Fort Harrod. We were looking for a place that matched what we felt would properly pay homage to the area as Wilderness Trail Distillery. We were looking for a nice resting place for that. And the Willis Grimes house here offered that. It's a beautiful setting on a nice farm that dates back to periods to when really our industry got started in Kentucky and became famous for making Kentucky bourbon. It allowed us the opportunity to take a really strong bones of a home and really not do that much to it. So we've tried to keep it mainly intact to its original shape. And so the restoration for us has been a new roof, correcting some leaks around the wood and the trim on the outside that's just been
cornice on the outside,
of things.
And some of the windows.
Yep, so we had to replace a couple of windows. And then from there we wanted to kind of keep that intact of just what was the original look of the home back in that period. What we're utilizing it for is we'll have offices upstairs, we'll have our gift shop here in one of the rooms, one of our tasting rooms for people who can come along the Kentucky Bourbon Trail Craft Tour, which we are a part of. So once we have tourism that comes through here, we have people that can visit a gift shop, have a tasting to kind of check out some samples of things.
We're already booking weddings here.
Yeah, so as an event center, there's going to be really another spot for the community to have more events and more opportunities to come and kind of share in the beauty of what really Boyle County has to offer. What we're looking for is probably in about 6 to 8 weeks, we'll be open to the public here. The nature of our business has us, making whiskey, storing whiskey for 5 to 7 years. So that means that we're kind of always in a construction mode out here. So even though we're wrapping up this home and turning it into our gift center, our visitor center, and our distillery is finishing up and we're going to be making more bourbon, we're actually in construction again on the lower side of the property for our second rick house, which will be a 10,000 barrel rick house to store more bourbon. So this property will continue to evolve over the next decade, and hopefully it turns into a great place that the community can come and enjoy.
What do we do with these places? What can we do when the future of one of these often historic homes remains uncertain? Some may be beyond saving, but many can still contribute to the community. They can be functional buildings again that not only hold our memories, but contribute to a strong economic future for Danville and Boyle County.